Hello, class. Today we are going to be taking a look at Donkey Kong, one of the original arcade games that many of you might remember from your childhood. The goal of us looking at Donkey Kong today is to look at the thought process and the many various game design aspects that we can find in the first level and sort of interpret or gain an understanding of what the developers had in mind when they were creating Donkey Kong. So we'll be going over the sprites that we see on the screen, we'll be going over the level design, we'll be going over the UI, and then we'll be looking at sort of the interactions. So why don't we jump right in to the game. Alright, so I've paused the game so we can take a quick look at what we see on the screen when we start. So let's take a look at the sprites first. So the first thing that catches your eye would be the top left of the screen here, because it's out of everything else on the screen, this is the most colorful. It has the most contrast compared to our background. So what do we see in the top left over here in terms of sprites? We see this weird oval-shaped sprite here, and we see one here. And what it appears as if these are some sort of barrels. The next thing we see is we see Donkey Kong here. And Donkey Kong appears to be grabbing barrels and then tossing them down. The next sprite we see over here appears to be some sort of girl or princess. And finally, just because we're in this area, we can see that there is a sprite over here that appears to be some sort of old cartoonish styled hammer. One you might see on like Tom and Jerry or something like that. You can also see there's one down here. So, without even having moved on our screen, we have started to see what our objective is. And our objective seems to be to get to this area up here. This seems to be some sort of hotspot for us to go to. Looking further down, we can see our character sprite, Mario, will appear at the bottom left. And we appear to have some sort of container next to us that says oil. So, we can see what our objective is, and we can see where we are. So then the next question becomes, how do we get there? So by taking a look at the level design, we can get sort of that understanding. So let's start here with where we're standing with Mario. From looking from bottom to top, we can see that there are like these pinkish or purplish floors to walk on. And there appears to be many of these spaced out and spread all throughout the screen. Between them, we have ladders. Some of these ladders are complete from top to bottom. Some of these ladders are incomplete, so there's some sort of hole in between them. So, what we can interpret from this without even looking, without even having played the game just yet, is that we are going to have to start moving across these platforms from starting bottom left to right, then right to left, and then back and forth until we reach the top. Now, we can see that when we were talking about our objective over here, Donkey Kong doesn't seem to be very fond of us coming after him, rather. Because what it appears is that he is grabbing from this stack of barrels and is going to start throwing them at us. We'll get to that in a second. So, looking at that, we have our character, we have our objective, and we know how to get there. So, let us start. Let us start to proceed through the level and see what happens. So you can see that there's a barrel that is tossed down, and that barrel, if you might have noticed, was located right on top of us. That barrel fell from the top of where Donkey Kong is standing, directly straight down, and to directly on top of us, where we would have been if we had moved. What this creates is a sense of urgency for the player. The player, if he wants to proceed, has no choice but to start moving. And which direction do we start moving towards? The direction we have to go in. By going from the left starting spot to the right starting spot, we get to the ladder where we have to climb up to get to the next platform. This is the direction we have to go. And the game is offering us an incentive to start moving forward by dropping a barrel on top of us, to force us to move or not be able to proceed. Now, what we have just seen is the barrel, when it fell, it started rolling backwards, opposite of the direction we're going. And it went into the oil barrel and lit it on fire. And out of that fire came this little, ember or sprite or wisp, whatever you might want to call it, this little flame. So what we can see from here is there are many different obstacles that we are going to have to overcome. The first, as we can see from the barrel that just fell and the barrel the second barrel that he threw, is that these barrels are going to come down either from Donkey Kong or roll down the platforms opposite of us and form obstacles for us to overcome. The second thing is we can see that the barrels, when they've completed their journey downwards, they will ignite and this little flame will pop out and come after us. So the game is telling us, okay, you have to move forward and get to the top left where Donkey Kong is to save this princess. You have to climb up, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, and avoid barrels. But what the game is also doing is it's telling us you gotta move and you gotta move quickly. And it's telling us that without saying anything by throwing that little sprite or ember at us. The sprite comes from behind us, so we have an obstacle coming at us from the front and an obstacle coming at us from behind. So it's creating the sense of urgency saying, go, go, go. So what we can tell from that is that this is going to be a very fast-paced game. This isn't something that's meant to be drawn out. It's not a test of endurance, it's a test of speed. How quickly can you get to the top to avoid getting attacked by many barrels and many sprites. Now, something else we're going to point out here to draw on that sense of urgency is you can see that for about every second that we are progressing in the game, the bonus counter up here is going down. So what we can see from this is that over here in the top left we have some sort of score. We haven't figured out how to gain any score, and there's nothing indicating that this is score. But a string of numbers is typically used to indicate that you're supposed to be counting something. We're not counting down because we all start at 0, so it's obviously meant to be some sort of score. Because if it was, we'd have some sort of set limit. We'd have 300 seconds, 400 seconds, 500 seconds, and it would count down. This is starting at 0, so the only way to go from there is up. We see, to the right of that, we see a top score, so it seems to be tracking what our top score could be as well. So, from the combination of the barrels and the sprites and the flame, on top of the bonus score constantly ticking down, we can see that there is a sense of urgency, and you can see that just me unpausing it for a few seconds, we've already had a series of barrels start to come down, and they've all come down in different ways. The top one over here is rolling down from Donkey Kong. The one underneath it rolled down and is starting to roll down the other way. Then we have this barrel in the middle left over here, which appears to be just falling down. It's falling down a ladder, one of the incomplete ladders, I might add. So these barrels are going to come at us from surprising angles. They could come down the same way we have to go up. They can go left to right, right to left, down, down, down. Or they can come straight down like at the beginning, straight from Donkey Kong. He could just chuck it at us. Or the barrels could follow down and come at us from any angle. So we have a lot to deal with, and the game gives us that sense of urgency very, very quickly. So I'm not sure if I can actually progress from here. Let's see if I can... Can I make it over that? I can't. I tried. So we'll take another shot over here. And as you can see, just to point out, once I did that, every time I've died, the indicator over here with the M has gone down. So our character is Mario, so it makes sense that this M would stand for our name. And this number here has counted down from 2 to 1 to 0. So that's been telling us how many lives we have left. I must not be a real gamer because I've already died twice. So I have no lives left, which means after this I would need to restart. So let's see how well we can progress through the level and take a notice of what we see. So there's the first barrel that falls down and gives us that sprite, that flame. You can see that the barrels are falling down from there. I'm going to attempt to grab this. And so the reason why I went to grab that is because we sort of determined at the beginning when we were talking about the sprites that it was some sort of hammer. Now, what is a hammer used for? It's used for smashing things. So I sort of took the interpretation that, okay, it's a hammer, there are barrels coming at me, the only thing I can hit is the barrels, so why don't I try grabbing it and see? So what happens is that we appear to get this hammer, and as we smash the barrels rather, we're gaining score. And the same thing happens as we jump over the barrels. We gain a little bit of score for that too. And we're greeted with a lovely game over message if we lose. So we can see now that our score is determined by avoiding obstacles or destroying the obstacles. And we also have the bonus score given to us for how fast we can complete this. So let's give this another go now that we don't have a lot more to analyze specifically. So you can see that the flame sprite actually can climb ladders as well. I actually don't know how I died there. That's very strange. Let's give it another go. I can't seem to jump when I have the hammer, so we can sort of determine that, okay, if you need to pick up the hammer, you can't just breeze through and progress. You need to, you know, it gives you a little bit of safety in case of an emergency, so it may not always be a good idea to pick it up right away. And as you can see, I died because of that barrel. So we can see on top of this that there doesn't seem to be a set pattern for the barrels. They seem to just fall whenever they want to, and that can be a little tricky to navigate because you always want to make sure the player has an understanding of what's going on. As you can see, as we get closer to the top, it sort of gets harder to get past here because of how frequently Donkey Kong is throwing those barrels. Oh, man. I was right there, too. Well, it didn't take us that long to get there, so let's try again. You might also notice that the music that is played at the beginning sort of gives us a time, almost like a timer that tells us when exactly we're going to be starting as we load in. Woof! So that barrel, so now we just saw that there is a fourth way the barrels can go down, and they can go down in like a diagonal randomly. I don't think that's how a barrel works. I'm not a barrel expert, though, so... Let's see if I can not screw this one up. And I did it! So, let's talk about that real quick. So, when I made it to the top, and I was able to get to the princess, the game gave me an indication that I won by playing a little bit of a tune, and the game just immediately loaded me into the next level. So I want to actually restart this real quick so we can go back to the first level and just look at it overall one more time. Okay, so we load in, we're given our objective, we're given obstacles, we're given tools to overcome those obstacles. So let's start to decide what parts about this are good game design and what parts of this are bad game design. So one of the things we can say that we were talking about near the beginning is that because of how clearly of an indicator this top left is of what our objective is, this would be good game design in my opinion. Compared to everything else on the screen, it's very bright, it's very colorful, so it draws your eyes in. You can see that our enemy, Donkey Kong, is in the top left. You can see he has his barrels, his tools that he's going to use to obstruct you. And then we have the princess, which is, typical knight in shining armor comes and saves the princess sort of thing. So here's our objective, this is our obstacles, and the reward is right here, saving the princess. So, from the very beginning, it's very clear as to what our objective is, and that's done with the artistic, colorful choice of our obstacles. In terms of the objective, it's also very clear as to how we're supposed to get up the level. You can see Mario starts at the bottom, and you can see that the way that the platforms are, take a look at how the diagonal platforms sort of move in that zigzag shape rather. What would happen if these platforms were kind of just straight? So all these platforms are just straight lines, and then there are ladders. We still might have an indication that we have to go up. But what the level design does in terms of the zigzag is that the zigzag draws your eyes upward in like a snake-like pattern. It's like, okay, slowly go up, and you're shown going up is the correct way. On top of that, the ladders also do the same thing. Ladders are an indication of climbing, and climbing typically means, going up. So you can see that, okay, this is what our supposed objective is, and then here the actual level design is drawing us up, and the ladders we have to climb are drawing our eyes upward. So the level design and giving the player information without really telling them anything in terms of this is really good. All of the level design flows very nicely and flows towards the objective. There's not really a way to get lost, so to speak. There's not branching pathways. In fact, there's multiple ladders that, even though some of them are broken, there are multiple ladders on almost every level to climb towards the thing. So you can have, if you're quick enough, you can get on the closer ladders, in the middle, on the second platform, in the middle, and the third platform over here. There's many different ways, but they all go up. Everything goes up. And that's something important to keep in mind in terms of level design. Where do you want your player to go? Speaking of that, on top of that, let's take a look at Mario real quick again. Mario is facing to the right. In order to start moving, Mario's got to start moving right, and he's got to start moving right away. So even just Mario's presence and placement on the screen facing right shows us which direction we have to go, tells us where we have to go without saying anything. And that really is one of the hallmarks of good game design, is when you can indicate to the player, when you can give the player information without actually telling them anything. So, let's talk about some of the other aspects of this. Let's talk about the barrels. The barrels have many indications of both good game design and bad game design, I would say, in my opinion. So let's focus on the positives first. What are the good elements of the barrels? Well, for the most part, the barrels seem to always behave in the same way almost all the time. Donkey Kong will roll a barrel from the top left, and it will make its way down to the bottom left, towards where you are. So what we can tell is that it appears to, for the most part, it appears to obey gravity. So we can always tell that if a barrel is thrown, it's going to roll down from left to right, and it's always going to go from top to bottom. So we can tell that there are some rules for the barrels, and that's at least from that perspective, it's good. Now, where I would argue the bad game design is how the barrels move. So, taking this from a perspective of somebody who's brand new and looking at this for the first time, let's just say, the barrels seem to roll randomly. there is no indication as to whether a barrel will make it to the end of the platform and then just fall off. There's no indication that a barrel will grab onto any type of specific ladder. So Donkey Kong could roll a barrel, and it can either stop at this first ladder right here, this first broken ladder that we see. It can roll on over and fall at the second ladder, or it could go all the way off and fall at the bottom. Now, giving various different options for how the barrels come down is not necessarily a bad choice. The problem comes in when we can't tell how the barrel is going to fall. We can't tell if it's going to roll all the way off. It's not if it can go off the broken ladder, if it'll roll down the regular ladder. We have no way to tell, and that causes a couple of problems. Like one thing that happened when I was just playing and showing you was that I think at this third ladder on the third platform, what is this, the third or fourth platform over here, right below this hammer, the barrel just started rolling down the ladder as I was climbing it. If I had known that that barrel was going to go down that specific ladder, I wouldn't have climbed it. Wouldn't have clomb it. I probably didn't say that right. But so the question is that if giving all these different random, if the barrels themselves aren't bad design, and but the randomness of their movement is sort of bad design, what could we do about that? Well, there's many different options. So, as we are playing the game, one thing we see is that, let's move out of the way of this first one. There is a side to the barrels, like there is a top and bottom rather, and you can see that there's some sort of marker there indicating that there's some sort of like symbol on the barrel. Different barrels can have different symbols. So maybe there's a blue symbol that means the barrel is just going to keep rolling as far as it can. Maybe there's a red symbol where that means that this barrel could go down any ladder. Maybe there'll be a completely different colored barrel like we saw, that one barrel that just zigzagged down without obeying gravity. Maybe that's just a completely different colored barrel, and you know that just by what of a different color it is, that's what you have to avoid. Maybe instead of changing the symbols, you just change the color of all the barrels instead. So instead of giving it a red sign, it could be a red barrel that does the ladders. It could be an entirely blue barrel that does goes all the way down. So that's sort of the interpretation with the barrels and what we can do to fix that. The oil barrel. The oil barrel serves a purpose that is not immediately clear. So, as you remember, when the barrel will roll down, and then once the barrel hits the oil container, it will spawn a flame. And that flame will kind of semi-randomly move around. We determined earlier that the first barrel that Donkey Kong throws gives us a sense of urgency to start moving. The problem sort of comes about where there's a sense of urgency, but there's not a sense of why there is urgency, at least not immediately clear yet. So we're told through the gameplay, you gotta start moving, but we aren't immediately greeted with what we're supposed to be avoiding. And that's sort of a problem because we want to give the player the information that they need in order to progress. Something that they could have done is, for example, the oil barrel could have already been lit when you load into the game, but not immediately spawn the flame until the barrel hits it. This would give it an indication of, fire bad, but we're not confused as to why that oil barrel is there. The flame, and like I said, the flames aren't there to start with, so you just see an empty oil barrel and you don't really know what that is. That could just be a physical obstacle stopping you from falling off to the left. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything. It isn't until we're already moving and we've already started to progress that spawns, and now what you have is you have barrels coming at you from the top and from the sides, and then you have the flame coming at you from the bottom. And this sense of urgency can overwhelm the player. And the player can't learn what they're supposed to do if too much is thrown at them at one time. So very quickly, we see that the barrels start rolling real quick. The flame immediately can start climbing the ladder. You have all of these obstacles that you have to overcome. The flame doesn't even move like the barrels do. The flame moves back and forth, left and right, up and down, as much as it pleases. So the player can get very overwhelmed, and they can end up in situations where they're trapped and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to progress, and that's because everything is moving way too quickly. You start the level, Donkey Kong immediately drops the first barrel. That first barrel immediately is aimed right for your head, so you have to move. And then the second you move, that barrel goes down like the oil barrel, and then there's a flame behind you, and that flame is chasing you, and Donkey Kong is throwing more barrels, and it overwhelms the player. It does a good job of communicating that there needs to be urgency, but it doesn't do a good job of giving the player enough understanding to learn how to correctly move, jump, and avoid obstacles. Like I said, you can give some sort of indication to the oil barrel that you're supposed to avoid it. You could make the oil barrel, like I said, you could have it be on fire to start with. You could have it be flashing to give some sort of danger indication. In terms of the flame sprite, maybe that can only climb ladders that are complete. So if it's only able to climb ladders that are complete, or maybe not even that, maybe even that less that, maybe it can only climb the furthest most ladder. And that would allow there to be some sort of, that's sort of your timer. Instead of having a physical timer slow you down when you complete the level, the flame will move at a consistent speed. It will always follow you, and then it will always follow the furthest most ladder. So that way, that's sort of your timer. That way, you don't have to worry about, oh no, is the flame just going to start moving back and forth? Is it going to be moving left and right? Is it going to be going up and down the ladder and throwing me off? This would allow the player to have sort of an artificial timer as to how fast they need to complete this. That, I think, would be a better way to implement that. So the last thing is the hammer. The hammer is sort of immediate. Is for the most part, it's immediately apparent what it is. It looks like it's a hammer, a mallet, and those things are used to pound, used to smash. And so we can interpret from that okay, we can jump, grab the hammer, and break something. And we saw that from when I was playing that's exactly what we did. We were able to pick up the hammer, we were able to collect it, and then we were able to break it. We were able to break the barrels, rather. We got some good feedback with the hammer, is that the hammer, Mario has a unique animation. He's swinging the hammer when he's placing it, so again, it reinforces that idea of it's used to smash things. There's also a special sound that is playing. Different music starts playing when you have it, and it's not like a scary sort of violent sort of sound. It's kind of like a happy and like positive and like sort of gives you like an energetic sound, and that indicates to the player that they did good, that they did the right thing by getting the hammer, and then you're rewarded for it again by breaking those barrels. What we noticed about the hammer is that you can't jump with the hammer. And I don't think there's necessarily a problem with the hammer not being able to be jumped with. You know, the hammer could be heavy, and that's why you can't jump with it. The only problem is that the player doesn't learn that until they get that. So the player grabbing the hammer will start to progress forward, and then they'll run into a situation where they can't jump. And that can cause a problem if they're not in a position to be able to smash the barrel, but they could have avoided it if they jumped. Another instance would be if a barrel is falling down and the hammer is swinging in the wrong position. So if the barrel is coming down and the hammer is on the floor because you're in the middle of swinging it, the barrel will fall down on your head. And again, maybe you could have avoided that. So how would we sort of tackle this? We would need to give some sort of way to indicate that the hammer has some sort of weight to it. So maybe instead of the hammer floating, it's like sort of like turned over on the ground. Maybe barrels could break when they touch the hammer sitting, you know, when it's just by itself. If they were to fall down that specific way. So this first hammer we see, that could be moved in between the two complete ladders, and then you would have the option to see that a barrel could fall down the ladder and move past it, or if the barrel kept going and fell down the long way, it touches the hammer and then breaks. That way, you can get an indication that that it's heavy, it breaks things. You know, I think that the hammer has good implementation. You know, nothing is perfect. I think it does a pretty good job. These are just little nitpicks about clarity. And what we can do maybe we can improve it a little bit. But overall, I mean, the game is well designed. It's a very popular game. There are very few people who don't know about Donkey Kong. And this game in the arcades. So yeah. What we'll probably be doing next class is we'll either take a look at some of the other levels in the game and see how they start to change things. Yeah, that's probably what we'll do. So you guys will have a homework assignment that I will post alongside this video. I hope at least this first lesson was entertaining for all of you. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.